All right. Hey everyone. So my name is Utsap Saha, and I am here at Dev Bootcamp today, and we have a very special guest with us who is an expert on behavior change. Welcome, Dr. Brian Kugelman.
It's a pleasure.
So Dr. Kugelman has spent a few years studying online platforms and their efficacy around behavior change. And we have a few questions for Brian today around that. And so, Brian, welcome. One thing we really want to ask you about is this paper. And this is called Online Interventions for Social Marketing, Health Behavior Change Campaigns. So, Brian, maybe you could, just to start, I'm curious to know why you're so passionate about studying behavior change.
Well, if you want to know about my personal motivations, they started several years back. I started my career in Toronto, and I was doing work in the nonprofit sector, helping environmental organizations protect the environment by changing what people do. So the idea is that if you want to stop, landfills from just filling up with waste and garbage, we have to get people to start making, better consumer choices, and recycling more, not buying sort of wasteful packaging, and also getting involved with a bit of lobbying to try and stop companies from just putting out so much wasteful packaging in the first place. So this comes down to changing people's attitudes and their behaviors. And so in 1997, I built my first cheesy, by today's standard, website on GeoCities. I also read a book called Community. It was by Doug Mackenzie Moore on community-based social marketing, which is not social media marketing, but it's an approach to mass behavior change through marketing tactics. And I started using social marketing on the internet. I discovered it was really a winning combination, that I was able to design online campaigns back in 97 and 98 that were just shooting so far above targets. And so from that point, I knew I was onto a winning formula. I could see the numbers. And dedicated my career to using technology as a way of changing behavior. And that's where it started.
Interesting. So when you say that it was way above the targets, how do you measure success in that context?
Oh, we had very specific goals. So I for one of my campaigns in 1998, I had a job coordinating an event called Walk a Child to School Day. And for that event, we had a number of goals. So we were trying to promote public health, try and get people more physically active, have people exercise more and spend more time walking rather than sitting in a car. We also had environmental goals.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I'm hearing a lot of feedback here.
Yeah.
Are you hearing that as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's coming from. It's gone? Hello, hello.
Yeah, now it seems to be okay. Adam, were you hearing that?
Yeah, I heard something. There was some echo going on, so I'm not sure what that was.
Okay, interesting. By the way, I also just realized. Oh, there it is. Very weird. I can't see your video. Is there?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, turn this on.
And the echo is quite annoying, actually. Let me try unplugging my mic. Is that better? Try.
Yeah, sorry, I tried to put on my camera. I have an incompatibility with it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, when I speak, hold on, let me put on a headset, see if this changes anything. Or I could be feeding back through someone else's systems.
I'm not hearing the echo now, so.
I'm still hearing it a little bit.
Okay, one moment.
We'll try to debug this thing. Uh, let me, Adam, can you try muting your side just to see if that makes a difference?
Sure, let's see.
Hello, testing, testing, testing.
And I'm testing. Hello, this is Brian speaking.
Okay, that I don't hear the echo anymore at all. Adam, do you have headphones or something? Any way you could put those on?
Yeah, let me grab some. I'll keep it on mute, and then I'll
Okay,
get some headphones. So, yeah.
great, thanks. Okay, so the what were we talking about?
Oh,
Your position?
numbers. So how do I think it was about like how did I define success?
Right, right.
Yeah, so in 1998, we had very specific goals. So we had to get, I think it was 50 schools involved with this campaign. We were trying to reach populations of parents who would normally drive their children to school. We were trying to engage principals, local community leaders, and this was only focused on Ontario. But because of the internet, things accidentally, bubbled way beyond anyone's expectation. So in fact, 50 schools was an ambitious goal because this was our very first year. So not only did I hit that, but I got 60 schools involved. Plus, I got people at every level of government in my country to support the event. One parliamentarian read this out in our House of Commons. I got national media coverage. Our event spread to other countries, so it wasn't just to my state. I also spread across our country. So then I was designing resources and passing them out to other campaigns or happening in other cities. And also we did an evaluation at the end. So we had far larger numbers of people who were involved. And the online component was only part of it, but that was the part that helped us disseminate our message much further. And you need a good core campaign if you want to have any chance of success. But in the early days, the internet helped us, and also we were doing a lot more than just that. We were using all sorts of digital engagement as well. We were actually using fax, like mass faxes, doing data mining, form letters, mass personalization tactics, but through the post, fax, and a number of techniques that are still bread and butter marketing today, but we're just using older traditional media, but through very personalized tactics.
Mm. So when you say fax, you mean a fax machine? You were faxing documents to other people.
Yeah, we're doing mass personalized faxing. So we're
That
making.
sounds like a contradiction there. How can you do a mass personalized anything?
Yeah, well, you can do personalization to an individual.
Uh-huh.
And when you design a campaign where every individual receives a different message based on the factors that are going to motivate them and interest them, then you're just doing personalization on a mass scale.
Sure. That makes sense. I actually, that reminds me of one of the videos I watched. Here, let me paste it here. I don't know if you remember this, but I found this one on your blog where you were talking about persuasive technology for interactive design, and you gave different levels of engagement at some point in the video, and you talked about there's different levels of personalization. At the very bottom level, it's just like spam, and then right, and then you can keep personalizing and personalizing until you get to a point where it's almost like you're in the same room with the person and you know so much about this person.
Yeah, because relevance is the key to motivation. So if you can send someone a cold message, and if really they don't care about it at all, it's not solving any problem or it's not meeting any desire, it is spam at that point, right? It wasn't solicited. But if it's relevant to what a person does, to problems that they have, it helps them fix a problem, and they believe it's credible, they're more than likely they're going to pay attention at that point. So relevance is key.
Sure. So I actually sent you a cold email, and I'm curious to know what what was your thoughts on that? Why did you respond to my email?
Oh, well, it's credible. I can see that you're doing, real work in the field. Uh, and I respond to anyone who writes me something that's, it's relative. It's in the flow. Even if someone is off base with me, I'm always pretty polite. So I'll tell someone, this is not something I need. And I even sometimes give people lectures because I get tons of B2B calls for my business.
I see.
That I'm not your target audience. You might want to take me off your CRM because I'm not going to purchase this and it doesn't solve a problem. Or I'll say, you know what? I can do it way cheaper and better, and this is how I do it. So how are you going to sell me? And then I'll throw it back at them because I want to see how I like to learn people's selling tactics as well.
Mm,
So I'm
interesting.
not faulting or rude. I'm just being very honest. So.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's talk about the paper a little bit now. So in the paper, you analyze the effectiveness of different online interventions, and you talk about a few things some patterns you noticed about things that work versus don't work. And for example, you found that shorter interventions tend to be more effective than longer interventions, as well as feedback on performance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe before we even talk about that, could you just give the gist of this paper and what you found through your work on this?
Sure, and maybe I could also just start by putting it into a bit of context. So.
Sure, absolutely.
So when I started this research, I was trying to deal with one of the problems that existed in the scientific literature at the time, in that people knew that there was a ton of research that showed online health behavior change interventions were effective, that they could achieve good outcomes. And when I started my doctorate, the concept that you could influence a person's behavior through interaction online was considered ludicrous and ridiculous. And most people thought I was a little bit loopy for even pursuing a doctorate in this area. I, of course, knew that it worked because I had seen success, from my early days in '97. And so when I started my doctorate in 2006, almost 10 years later, I knew I was onto something that worked and was very effective. So I spent the first part of my research looking at all the literature that showed it work, and there was just so much. There were already statistical meta-analysis and systematic reviews that showed that they worked, but what they didn't do is show why they worked. So what were the elements of an online technology that could be used to influence a person's behavior? And I had the goal of figuring out those elements because I thought if I could almost come up with this shopping list of the winning factors, then I could use that as a basis for the design of effective technologies that were scientifically proven, and we could use these as templates for design. So the main findings were, the first one is that yes, these technologies are more effective. Just to put that into perspective, research on health behavior change interventions, at least in the area of social marketing, so that's normally using traditional advertising and health promotion to get people to live safer and healthier lives. So the average campaign is about 5% effective. So that's not huge, right? But that's the number. And I found that with online they're about 10%. There's a couple things with the stats that forced me to be a little cautious with that number, but we can use that as a sort of ballpark number. So it's 5% more effective, and you can also look at it and say it's about twice as effective. Even though it's not a huge number, these are small numbers. And so the main findings were, yes, very short interventions were good at changing more superficial behaviors. So in terms of getting someone to wake up and be shocked into realizing that, hey, maybe they should quit smoking, or maybe it will be good to watch their diet, or maybe be good to adopt some healthy habits. And so the short interventions were normally like questionnaires. They're almost like the pop Cosmo quiz. So there are a series of questions, and then at the end you get the results. And the results are normally designed to show you something you didn't know about yourself. And so because you're learning something new, it's more than likely going to change your attitude, because now you've been educated about something, and possibly you've been scared a little bit at the same time. So fear tactics are actually, I have no problem with using fear tactics. They work, but they just have to be put together in the right way. And so these short interventions would normally shock a person, then possibly try to get them into a longer term intervention. And then at that point, we're looking into something that might take a few months to run through, and that's going to be a coaching model, which is a different design pattern. And
Interesting. So when you say there's a shorter intervention, these examples are things like quizzes, or maybe I'm guessing just online advertising, maybe like for example, say, I'm trying to visualize what this would be. So is it like a poster you might put somewhere? Is that the equivalent of a short intervention?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the Centers for Disease Control in the U.S., they have awesome infographics, and I would say that they're evidence-based infographics, and that they follow very clear behavior change recipes. So,
Sure.
and it's really one of the simplest formulas out there. So there's something called the extended parallel process model, which comes from a statistical meta-analysis on fear appeals, and they looked at a number of things, but out of it, the main two factors are you can get someone to take action if you scare them a little bit, use a bit of a fear message, and it should be realistic, not like ridiculous fear-mongering, but an actual real problem that someone is facing or a real threat. And then you have to give them the efficacy message, which is a message that says, you know what, there's something you can do about it. And so these online screeners are sort of like that, in that they might shock or scare someone into making a change, raise their awareness, and then they say, look, you can deal with this, and here's how you do it. And in the case of this being an infographic, it's a fear message with an efficacy message.
I see. So the model that you would recommend then is to start with a really short online intervention, which might be, I don't know, I guess the equivalent would be something like an online quiz or maybe a blog post or an infographic, and have that lead to some kind of a longer term commitment.
Yeah, that's a great recipe. I don't know in America, but in Canada, there is an organization called the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Ontario. And I think they're sort of similar to the American Heart Association. So they use this formula for a lot of their interventions. So they start with the quizzes, and it's like the "Did you know?" or "Are you safe?" type of hook to bring someone in. They go through the intervention, and then they're upsold into the longer term.
That's interesting. I have a question about I'm trying to understand this in the context of online platforms. So a longer term, like what's an example of a long-term intervention online?
Yeah, so long-term interventions, they're those coaching models where people generally set goals.
Sure.
So, and then they'll get education and support to learn new skills. So a lot of them are actually they're a lot like learning management systems, but with a motivational layer thrown on top of it. So
I see. You also gave an example of something called stick.com in your lecture.
Mm-hmm.
What category does that fall under?
Oh, yeah, that actually, Stick is maybe a little closer to the first model that I discussed, but that's like a long-term version. Stick is a bit of a unique beast in online interventions, in that it's, I think it's very counterintuitive, and it does things that many people would say you shouldn't do, but they do things fairly well because they're a loss aversion-based motivational system. So.
Right, and those things that people say you shouldn't do are, I'm assuming you mean like punishing yourself, the negative type of motivation. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, like negative messaging can backfire, and so you really want to bring in someone with experience if you're dealing with negative messaging.
Mm.
Um, Anything that deals with punishment, and, like people they just make mistakes all the time. So I'll give you an example. People constantly confuse loss aversion with punishment, and they're really not the same thing. You know, related. So loss aversion is before a threat happens, and that's the fear that a bad outcome can happen. Whereas punishment is when that bad outcome actually happens. So,
Right.
like if I say if you do this, you're going to lose $50, that's loss aversion. If I take $50 from you, that's punishment.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of. It seems a little bit paradoxical because I think so. What you're saying is it's the fear of the punishment that's effective, but actually punishing somebody is not so effective.
yeah, I actually even read something Cicero in ancient Rome, who is a famous public speaker and lawyer and politician in his days, said that the fear of the law is far more effective than the application.
Yeah.
Um, and Cicero had a lot of things right, and his distinction between loss aversion and punishment was spot on. But so
Interesting.
Stick plays on loss aversion,
So
and
why
they
do you think that stick is so effective?
well, what they do with loss aversion is they turn up the heat on the loss aversion side of the equation. So they get you to set a goal, then they have you pick friends who are going to be judges. So that's good because it's also putting accountability, an extra degree of social pressure. So these are very effective. But then you really want it to work, they'll ask you to put a bit of money into escrow. So I don't know. So maybe throw down $100 or something.
Hmm.
And then these people are going to judge whether you achieve your goal or not. And if you don't achieve your goal, that money will go out to some payoff. So what they advise is that you send it off to an organization that you absolutely hate. So they have political or organizations that have political alignment in the far left and far right of U.S. politics.
Hmm.
So if you're on the more liberal side, you can have the money go to like your most vilely hated conservative think tank or lobby group. And if you're very conservative, you can have the money go out to the most liberal organization that makes you sick because it's just not in line with your political views. So
Hmm.
and the idea is that I think the more sick to your stomach you will feel by thinking about your money going to that group, the greater the loss aversion stakes.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
personally used stick for a few different things. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I was actually inspired by the stick model, and I created a prototype
Mhm.
of this app. It's called Up Early, and it basically helped me to scratch my own itch with a problem that I had, which was I could not wake up early.
Mm.
So if I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it for a minute. Did you see the link that I put there?
Oh, I'm. Hold on one second.
And I'm actually collaborating on this with Adam Reed there, who is as a coach on Coach.me. Apparently,
Right.
the most demanded habit that people ask for is to wake up early.
Mm.
So let me know when you have it up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so it's
I subscribed. Okay.
you actually don't have to subscribe. If you scroll down, you can kind of see how like the screenshots of how it works. So basically, what it does is it requires you to move 150 feet in the morning, um, and that's GPS verified. And beforehand, you put a financial stake on it.
Hmm.
Um, and if you don't do it, then the money gets sent to your friend, and you have the option of blasting your Facebook wall, which will basically publicly shame you for not waking up early.
Hmm.
So, what do you think about this kind of a model?
Yeah, these are all like viable methods, and you know many people find these horrifying, but if a person wants to do something, achieve a goal, they know that maybe they're a little weak with their willpower, there's barriers in their life, and they don't mind raising the stakes, and they accept public shame, losing money, and they accept that this is, part of like achieving goals, and I think it looks great.
Interesting, cool.
In theory, it looks perfect. I'll have to try it out, and then, but from a theoretical point of view, it looks great.
Sure. So getting back to your paper then, what are some of the other things that you found have been effective for online interventions?
Oh, hold on. I'm just grabbing a bit of water right now.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
But certainly the goal setting is a very key one. Giving people feedback on their performance.
What does that mean, feedback?
It just says that this is your goal and you're above the mark or you're below the mark.
Got it.
That alone is fairly effective. The problem is with tracking. It sounds like with your technology you're automating the tracking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have to check in, and it'll be verified.
Yeah, because recording data is a big barrier that a lot of the good technologies can overcome. So people have to go in and manually record data. That's a big barrier. So I think a lot of interventions die right then and there, just because the workload is too high. So having good low barriers to data collection is good. You mentioned time. So yeah, so shorter interventions are better. I forget the paper, but there was one that was arguing you really shouldn't go much beyond 2 months. Also, there's good research that now shows that habit formation will take on average 66 days. So that's another argument in favor of about a 2-month maximum time, and also possibly a minimum as well. Knowing that, I think 30 days you can do fairly well, and it seems like a good starting point. It's a good simple goal, but to really ingrain something, you'll probably need a bit more time. So you probably want to have a part 2, possibly a foot in the door technique. For that, and then a lot of the interventions, they're ultimately about education and support. So people fall off the bandwagon all the time, and the ones that are effective find out how to catch people and bring them back in.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious. I guess coming back to your original motivation, which was more environmentally based. Can you think of any ways to apply these types of tactics towards, say, making an app or some kind of website like Stick or some kind of online platform that would improve that cause?
Yeah, I find it's all about the mix of behavior change techniques or psychological appeals, or behavioral influencers. There's different names that people use to describe them. So it's all about a combination of principles. So for instance, with your app, you have an implicit goal already. So if someone's using the app, they've set the goal because you've literally nailed this thing to one specific outcome. So getting people to make a commitment. Part of it is the education. So figure out how are we going to educate people and teach them new skills. So education can include more the motivational side of things, where you tell people that these are the good things that will happen to you and these are the bad things. And that's more to get them in the first place and get them to commit. But after they commit, then it's about building skills. So, for instance, if you want people to get up, early, you might have to teach them skills. So that might, be techniques for how do you get yourself, how do you stop yourself from being wired at night, so that you can go to bed early. Maybe that's part of it. So, okay, do some environmental control. So, get away from your computer at, from 11 o'clock, or maybe, use one of these apps that uses a lower intensity light in your computer, so that you're not, wired up with energy and you're putting yourself in a more sleep state or stuff. So, part of it's skill development, education.
That's interesting. I didn't know that existed. So your computer will emit lower intensity light. That makes sense.
Yeah, I used to use it. I forget the name, but yeah, there's one. They argue that the high intensity light of your monitor will keep you awake, and so if you saw the app, it then dims it at night, and the idea is that it allows you to sleep better.
Okay, so I think that this was really good. The one thing I guess the last question I have, and then I'll ask Adam if you have any questions as well. Feel free to jump in. You have connected your work to BJ Fogg's model as well, and I'm curious to know what, I guess what your thoughts are on some of his behavior change theories. Like, there's one that was particularly kind of eye-opening to me, which was that there's a relationship between motivation and effort. And the most common problem is actually not a lack of motivation. It's that it's just too hard to do the thing.
Yeah. Those are the key, and I borrowed a lot from B.J. Fogg, and it's hard not to because he's contributed so much to the field. But I wouldn't say I built my model from him as much, just because he didn't invent those two models. In fact, we can go back and find in most of the literature, those are the two main ingredients in motivation. You might have heard the expression called willing and able. So that's an old adage that has been around for a long time. And you'll see these two constructs as the core elements. I looked at tons of scientific literature, and those two are the only two consistent in, I would say, almost every model of behavior change of motivation out there. So what B.J. Fogg did is he put them onto a two-dimensional space and said those are the two factors and here's how they relate. And I think that was a great contribution right there in terms of what it takes to get action. And the reason for this is very simple. So motivation, we can also call that just the desire to get something or the desire to avoid something bad. So.
Sorry. Continue that thought.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, like on the motivational side of things, we get people to do things by giving them an incentive, something that they want, or playing on more the negative side of emotion, where it's about avoiding pain. And so, there's very specific drivers. So, like if we're hungry, if we have biological needs, our body will kick in and tell us more in the negative sense, not that you want to get something good, but you have to avoid a very bad situation. Or if we're feeling threatened, we get a dose of cortisol, and this inspires us to take action in terms of fear. And then we have our social needs. So when we have an opportunity to connect with people, we get a good oxytocin boost, and that motivates us to want to connect with people. When we're rejected from groups, it feels horrible, and these motivate us. When we're given an opportunity for status and achieving things, these will drive us forward and motivate us. And when we lose it, it's horrifying. And so these are just a few things. I could go more into specifics of motivation, but...
Sure, yeah. Actually, speaking of the motivations, one of the students at Dev Bootcamp, he couldn't be here, but he watched your video that I linked to, and he wanted me to ask you a question about that. So he was wondering, because I think in the video you said that depending on the demographic, say for teenagers, they're more influenced by peer pressure. So I think you recommended to factor that into your model. And whereas adults are more risk averse, so you might want to show that your thing is more credible.
Mhm.
So his question was, is there a way to, say, help teenagers to not be so influenced by peer pressure? Because he's really interested in behavior change from that
Yeah.
angle. Like, how can you actually help people like improve and change? And conversely, for adults, is there a way you can help them to become less risk averse?
Yeah, like normally, I I think if you try and design something that's in line with how people actually are, you have better odds of success. Um, I think learning this, like if you had something that was about learning the skill to not be subject to peer pressure, that would be a great educational tool in itself. Also, another, for adults, learning how not to be, how not to live your life in fear, how to get over. I think Dale Carnegie, didn't he write a book? Was it how to like stop worrying? And I forget the title of it. It wasn't How to Win Friends and Influence People. Uh, how to stop worrying and get on with things. Sorry, I've gone blank on. But yeah, those would be great things. But if you were to try and reach a youth population and not use social pressure, I I think you'll be missing a key ingredient. And if you're designing something for adults, yeah, I only think that fear appeals. I think fear appeals work better on lower order needs, like basic survival and safety instincts. So I I would be a bit hesitant to not deal with them for something that's anywhere in like sort of survival and safety and security realm. But things like connecting with social and like status and love and getting fulfillment in life, there I don't think we have to worry as much about like negative factors.
I see. So it's like if you don't use those, if your target audience is teenagers and you're not somehow factoring in social pressure, you're missing out on something that could be very effective. I see what you're saying. Is there one thing I actually do want to ask you? There are some students here who are very interested in um, creating something around behavior change.
Mhm.
Uh, is there anything that they could do to uh, motivate you to be an advisor for them?
Uh, I mean, well, my only limitation is on time, which is pretty rough. But maybe next time I'm in the area, I can drop by. Also, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Uh,
Oh,
Does
Adam,
someone have?
could you mute the thing one more time, Adam?
Thanks, Adam. Oh yeah, so my time is pretty limited. I've had to call in, hire a staff just to manage my inbox because it's
Sure.
in my capacity. But maybe next time I'm in California, if we want to do like a session, I don't know if we have like a hackathon or educational session. I could run one. I have my commercial workshops and training, but I do a lot for in academic context all the time. So I always give lectures here and there. So
Okay. All right. Sure.
I would be coming by your area for sure in 2016. Um, I'm just waiting on my work visa, so I have to get that through, and then I'll even know if I can travel.
Sure. Well, thanks. Yeah, Dev Bootcamp has a campus here, and there's always like at least 100 students in the building, and they do things like hackathons. So I'm sure they'd appreciate having you here. Adam, do you have any questions for him?
Hey guys, and let me know if the feedback comes on. I just unmuted the line, obviously. Thanks both to Utab and Dr. Kugelman for doing this. I've been working with Utab for the last few months on going back and forth, refining this this app, as well as doing some coaching on waking early. One of the things you mentioned was about the reduction of friction, both in data collection, going more for ambient data collection versus that manual entry, which can end up being kind of a deal killer. You also mentioned something really interesting about the recipe for success, that there's a few different components that go into getting somebody interested, showing them the reason for change, and then walking them through it for the 1 or 2 months that it takes to stick. People tend to drop out. I've coached probably 60 clients, and maybe 20% of them were just kicking the tires, so they were just around for the free week. The rest, maybe half, went through a similar experience where they started to kind of fall off 1, 2, 3 weeks in, and capturing them back kind of in spite of themselves, either with some type of quote or a video of why they originally decided to make a commitment to change. How do you recommend that we might incorporate capturing those people as they start to fall off? Because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to bring them back into the fold.
Yeah, that's like typical, and it's great that you brought that up, because that's one of the dirty truths that a lot of people in this space don't talk about. That if they have big numbers that they're boasting, those are not the numbers of people with actual real outcomes. Those are normally sign-ups, and they're very superficial because people drop out in amazing numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about with some interventions, 80% dropout just on the second day alone. So these are big. Oh, sorry. Oh, I can't hear you out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's one area of research that's pretty helpful in this, and the scholar Gunther Eisenbach, who runs the journal Medical Internet Research, he wrote a paper years ago called The Law of Attrition, where he was looking at this not pleasant reality that a lot of people do drop out. And I was also doing research in that space. And one thing I discovered is people who do stick with the programs, the few who stay with it normally get the good outcomes. So the key is to figure out how do you hold people in, and make that part of your strategy. Retention is really key. So it's almost as important as it's core to what you're doing. Even if you have a good program, it'll have no impact if people don't stick with it. So maybe one of the good areas of advice comes from Prochaska's stages of change research. So Prochaska has this one method where before someone even joins the program, and it might be a little harder in your case, but well, here's the idea. I'll throw it out. The idea is that you give someone, before they change, you ask them why are they changing? Why do they even want to do this? And they should make a list of pros and cons. So these are the good things I want, and these are the things that are going to suck, that I'm going to give up. And then they should be able to look at that and say, you know what, these pros outweigh the cons, and this is something I want to do. And if they go through that exercise, there's actually a list. And so what happens when someone falls off the bandwagon, and they do, so you just have to plan for this, is you try and remotivate them if it's a motivational problem, or you try and solve structural time problems if it's an ability problem. So what you might want to do is bring back that list of motivators and say, this is why you're, achieving it. Maybe even throw in some loss aversions. You know what? You're not going to get these if you drop out of the program. So that's one thing. If the problem is on the ability side of things, and also this is where I like BJ Fogg's model. It's hard to know why someone has dropped out, but if it is not a motivation problem, but it's an ability problem, then it's going to probably be about time management and helping them sort of fit it into a busy, crazy schedule. So those are two ways of dealing with it, but normally things fall into those. And also, Sub, you mentioned BJ Fogg's model. And I really like it, but the advice I gave you, you'll find that in BJ Fogg's research, but you'll also find that in Prochaska's stages of change, otherwise known as a trans-theoretical model. And the only way you motivate people to move is through efficacy and motivation. And then all of these other principles that we apply are more like, they're tactics that we use at a given point in the change process. But your bread and butter is motivation and efficacy and ability.
By the way, how do you spell Petraska?
I think it's Prochaska.
Prochaska. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
His stuff is very influential. It's just people in the tech sector don't know it. So BJ started doing work in persuasive technology. However, the real experts in persuasion are in health behavior change. They spend more money and do more research and more efficacy studies in health than I would say in any other area. And the work of Prochaska is insanely influential, and most people don't even know about it.
Okay, I'll definitely look that up. Any other big players in the health behavior change research that we should pay attention to?
Yeah, well, I would say Prochaska's model underpins most of them, most technologies. Another one, he actually didn't start in health, but his models are used a lot in health, and that's Everett Rogers. So, Rogers' diffusion of innovations model?
I haven't. I'll look that one up. Everett.
Yeah, Rogers is pretty influential. Everyone thinks that his work was done by Malcolm Gladwell. It's weird. Malcolm Gladwell wrote The Tipping Point. He stole Rogers' work. I don't know why he didn't quote Rogers. It doesn't make any sense because it's entirely another academic's work that he wrote about. It's insane that this was not. Rogers wasn't even mentioned in the book. But Rogers is a real academic who came out with all these theories. And this is about population health and how innovations are taken up in communities, and they talk about what it changed to bring things out to the market. It's a bit more useful more on the marketing side and bringing things out. But it's how you find those people who will help you climb the credibility ladder.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cugelman. Maybe to close, could you tell us a little bit about the commercial workshops you have coming up and what those are about and when they're happening?
Yeah, so I've taken my science and I've boiled it down into now 3-day workshops. So I have a 2-day workshop where I take people through roughly 50 principles of behavior change, and then I teach people how to identify them and then apply them to their own work. And then we always end by looking at how we optimize these with some of the great online research tools. And then my 3rd-day workshop is about psychological architecture. So these are behavior change patterns, combinations of psychology that work so well together that they almost give you a starting point for where you're at, or a framework for auditing gaps and problems that you might have. And we spoke a lot about coaching. Coaching is one of the big models that we see all over the place. I love coaching. I think it's one of the killer winning formulas.
And to find these trainings, you can go to alterspark.com.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. All right, Dr. Cugelman, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot from this. Adam, any final questions?
No, but thank you both. I have to say this was an hour very well spent. So thank you, Dr. Cugelman. Incredibly insightful. Thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure. And if you want to follow up about a visit when I'm in California next time, let's do that.
Sure. All right, I'll reach out to you. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Take care,
Have
guys.
a nice day.